Yeah, I'm taking a break, and I'd like to share with you some of my ideas on religion. And my blog really, and I like to think about a lot of things, and religion has always been kind of a sticking point for me, because the way I look at it really is it's a belief structure built on basically the ideas of ignorant men. And if you're offended by that, understand what I mean by it, because really, if you think about when religion came about, it came about some 3,000 years ago. It's not a modern definition. It's actually it's a prehistory definition. It's a definition that, as we all know, was used initially as a way to basically answer the unknowns, like why is it windy, why is it raining, why is there a storm, or why did we have a flood, or why did these things happen? And we didn't understand the science behind these things. So ultimately what we did was we had to, have an answer, because, we all were kids one time, and we're all turned to someone and say, Daddy, why is that red? Or why is the sun there? Or why? Because it's human nature to question. Now, I take it more philosophical. Like our whole reason for questioning actually comes down to basically the universe asking itself, who am I? And we're ultimately the consciousness of the universe waking up to itself. To me, God is more of a metaphor to the totality of everything. And if you think about this, you talk about, well, how can you exist without God? Well, think about it this way. I look at God as a metaphor for all things. Now, I don't say that it has some sort of conscious intellect, because that's just stupid. The idea that something is intelligent outside of me is basically, I might as well believe in Santa Claus coming for Christmas. One, how can I say that? There's no evidence. And the common thing is, well, just because you can't prove it doesn't mean it's not true. Well, if I'm going to take that line of questioning, then I might as well just not, I might as well just believe in everything, because there's a lot of shit that I can't prove, and doesn't mean just because I can't prove it, doesn't give me the right to say it exists. It's the whole idea of the tea kettle. You can't prove that there's a tea kettle floating around out in space somewhere. Well, so it must be there, right? So let's worship the tea kettle. That was, can't remember who that was. Anyway, so the beautiful thing is that science actually provides some very beautiful answers. And some things that you may know, or some people don't believe in, but there's a lot of evidence, and we spent billions of dollars to basically, to substantiate the proof, and that is with CERN and super colliders and everything else, is that basically there was a Big Bang, or what we call a Big Bang. And if you think about it, what science says about the Big Bang is everything was one. Everything was this proto-atom. Everything we see, and there's a law of thermodynamics, is conservation of mass and energy, says that basically energy can't be created. It can only move from one state to another. So in that moment of the Big Bang, and the Big Bang in a way is still continuing, all the energy and all the things that we see right now that creates these things came out of that one event. So if you imagine for a second, we're the pre-Big Bang, okay? So everything was one. So for me to kind of, play with this idea that we're all one thing, it's easy just to go back to a state, like, think of it like, at one point I was an egg, right? At one point everything was in that egg with me, right? So at one point the universe ultimately is what? My mother, the birth, the Big Bang. So the universe, as we know, didn't even exist prior to the Big Bang, because there was nothing there. And there can't be anything in nothing. So, and then, the theoretical article goes, well, then what was there? And there was nothing. It's simple as that. So I love how how basically religion keeps going back. It's like, I've lost the argument for the earth, so now I'm going to take the argument to the universe, and then I'm going to take, well, okay, it's a Big Bang, but then I'm going to say, what created the Big Bang? I mean, it's the rabbit hole, and you can chase that hole all the way to whatever. But the fact that you can't find an answer to it doesn't mean that you have to create some mythical, magical thing to answer it. Because the beauty of what we have is just as magnificent as what is described in the Old Testament, if you want to choose to see it that way. Because ultimately, once you start realizing that we're all one thing, right, as I just made the allusion to, then really, then you realize that really everyone here, everyone is, you know, brothers and sisters, even with animals and everything else. We all came from the same proto moment that created the Big Bang. And there's even other things called like supersymmetry and other things that actually prove that there is a communication or data exchange between one thing to another, which is, to me, very interesting, because I think if it exists in one thing, it probably exists in all things, right? Because if it's there, there's probably, we just don't detect it in other things. So the fact that there's supersymmetry, and there's been, you know, they've basically shown like quantum teleportation, you know, is pretty amazing. The other thing most people don't realize, and the big argument about, you know, about eternity and everything else, is this whole time thing, right? See, time is actually an illusion, and time only exists in our dimension. When you start going down to you know, to a quantum level, time, the hour of time doesn't exist. It can loop around, it jumps around, it does all these different crazy things. So imagine, see, when you have the proto whatever event prior to the Big Bang, you're dealing in the quantum scale. So our idea of time, that there was something before time, time did not exist before that, because time wasn't there to exist, if that makes sense. So you're kind of living in a state of flux, and then boom, it happens. So it's all kind of, you know, it's hard for us to understand, just as it is for a two-dimensional thing to understand a three-dimensional, for us to a three-dimensional thing to understand a 4 to 11-dimensional concept. And I'm not saying that I understand it, but when you start thinking in terms of religion, in sense of, you know, tying it in with science, and understanding that basically the answers, you know, the beauty and the majesty of science is enough that we don't need these archaic buildings that justify nothing but, you know, greed and harm and war and everything else, and controlling power. And, you know, it is things like this, these religions and everything else that really cause more harm than anything else. So, what does that make me? Does that make me an atheist? I don't know. I believe in God. I just define him differently than you. I define God as a connectivity of all things together in the universe. It is that sense that we feel when we feel that oneness, when we feel that connection to God. What we're really feeling is a connection to all things, and I've given that name quantum distributive unconsciousness, right? It's this unconscious connection to all things that once you experience and once you feel, then you feel this connection with God. We give that connection kind of an illusion or a fallacy, or, you know, we make up and try to say it's something else, but really it's just that. When you understand that we're all one, and all things in the universe came out of one proto-molecule in the Big Bang, and you start feeling that connectivity with all things, that feeling is that moment when you start touching God.